Hi, I'm Donna Jordan from Jordan Fabrics. Today I'm going to show you how to make a pattern from Cozy Quilt Designs. All we need is a jelly roll. So we're going to use this jelly roll with Arboretum Batiks. We're going to use the pattern Equinox, and we need a background fabric. So here we go. Let's take this down to the studio and get started. I've got a really nice jelly roll here that is colorful, and that's good for the size pattern I'm going to do, because I'm going to do the throw size. It takes 40 strips, but it's important that those 40 strips are all colorful and will show up against the background. So you can see the background, there's quite a bit of background, and we're going to use this. Now, some jelly rolls have a lot of light prints in them. This one happens to be all colorful. So these all will show up well against that background. If you find you have a jelly roll that has a lot of light prints in it, then you might want to cut a few strips from your stash so that they will all show up against the background. I'm going to go ahead and get the background fabric ironed up and cut. So I'm going to follow Cozy's instructions. They're easy to follow, and we'll get the background ready to stitch to our other strips. I have all of the background cut and all of these strips subcut, and now we're ready to pull off some pieces for one block, and then we need to mark some diagonal lines on the back of some of these pieces. First step is to take 4 of these squares and put a diagonal line right across the middle of the back. I like to use a pencil. You can use chalk, and this is really easy. You can just go from corner to corner, but remember, move your straight edge over a little bit because your pencil is a little bit wide. So you know, if you draw it, if it's going right from corner to corner, that you've moved it over enough. If you put it right on the center like this and draw, you might end up with the line too far to the right. So kind of adjust as you go. So that one actually is right on the center. So that's what I'm going to try to head for every time, is right along the center. Let's take these and 2 bigs and 2 littles and start sewing our star together. Now we're going to stitch the background blocks onto the colored pieces. So we're going to use these 2 with that direction of stitching, and then I've turned the block so these 2 are the opposite. And I'm going to stitch right along the line, or a hair to that side of it. Now you can tell if you have it stitched exactly right by flipping this over. If the lines all meet up, if the corners match, then you have sewn right along the diagonal, and I'm just going to finger press it. That works really well when you're using batiks like I've got here. I still like to iron these just a little bit, and then I am going to trim off those bottom 2 layers. Now you can do it with a rotary cutter if you like, but on something small like this, I'm usually just going to use my scissors. Now we need to mark on the back of these dark squares. This is when I might use a chalk pencil because I don't think my lead pencil is going to show. So I usually have 2 marking things handy. There, that shows up a lot better on that dark. Now we're going to take these squares here and we're basically going to make a flying geese block. So check the pattern so you can make sure you've got this piece oriented correctly. Again, we're going to pull this over, make sure everything matches up, and finger press. Now you can take these over and iron them, but mine are nice and flat already, so I'm going to cut this off and sew the second half of the flying geese on and then iron it. Again, stitch right along that diagonal on both of these pieces. Now we can start seeing what the star is going to look like. So we're going to have 2 greens, 2 purples for this block, And then these flying geese are going to go here and here. And then there's going to be some corner blocks, just some plain ones. And now we're ready to make the outside of the block. For the outside of the block, we need 4 of these longer pieces and 4 of these shorter pieces. And we need to mark the back side of them. We need to mark a 45-degree line on the back side of them. So the easiest way for me is to use my ruler because it has a 45-degree line on it. So I need to mark 2 like this. Let me move this stuff out of the way here. So I'm going to put my 45-degree line along one edge. Then I'm going to slide it up until this edge hits the corner. Make sure I'm still lined up. And then I'm going to draw a line. We're basically going to use the same method we used before. We're going to stitch on the diagonal or a hair to the right. Now this piece is going to open up here and it should make a nice long straight line. So if everything lines up, you know you've stitched your diagonal correctly. So we are just going to trim off this extra bit here. Now we're going to add a second piece of the same fabric to the other side. Line everything up and stitch right along your drawn line. Now these line up here, and you can see this is going to make 2 of the long borders. Then we're going to do the same thing with these short guys and we'll get 2 short borders. I have all of the pieces for the block now. So the short sides, the short borders, are going to go on the top and bottom, right on the flying geese side. And then these longer borders will fit exactly on here once we get all the seam allowances stitched up. So just sew the blocks onto here, little seam there, blocks onto here. Sew these short rows and then add these all the way around the edges. All of the blocks are stitched together. This is a really fun pattern to sew. And I used the hope and sew method for all of these. And when I say hope and sew, I sewed these borders on and I just hoped that everything would match up and none of the points would be unmatching here or here. And look, without me even putting pins in or checking, they're close enough. To lay out the blocks, we are going to put a block that has the longer pieces up next to the block that has the shorter pieces here. And that's good because we won't have to match anything within the middle of the block there. So each one is going to get turned. So they're going to get turned every time. So I'm going to lay them out. And I'm not going to put colors that are real similar close to themselves. So I probably wouldn't put this here. I'm just going to lay everything out and then I may do some trading. Now that the whole quilt is laid out and the colors are nice and balanced, I'm going to take this right over to the machine and stitch it up. When you sew your blocks together, you do want these 2 points to meet. What I do to make sure that happens is I take a pin and I'm going to poke it right here at this intersection. And then I'm going to take that same pin and point it right at that spot on the bottom piece. Slide everything down, and then you can even pin it right there. And that way you know those spots will line up when you stitch. Now I'm going to take the pin out before I get to it. I might leave it poked through like that. And that way I know we're going to get nice points. Just about perfect. I have the quilt top done and we're ready to put it on the machine. Now the quilting machine is here in our retail store. Our customers like to see quilts being quilted. The machine is so fun to watch. So I'm going to show you why we need a little bit of extra backing, bigger backing than our quilt top is. I have my backing cut at least 6 inches bigger width and length, and it's all stretched out flat on the quilting machine here. And now I'm going to place the batting on top of that. So the batting is going to do what we call float on the top. So I'm just going to put it on top of here. It's not pinned on, it's not stretched on. We're just going to flatten it out. Now that the batting is nice and smooth and flat, I'm going to stitch a straight line right across the top here. Now I'm going to put the top of the quilt lined up on that stitch line. So I'm going to find the middle of the quilt. We've got 4 blocks, so this is the middle right here, and that's going to go right where this mark is. I centered up my back, I centered up the batting, and now I'm centering the top so that I know I will have equal amounts of batting and backing left on each side. Now I'm going to baste everything together. So I'm using a long stitch, and I'm just going about a 1/4 inch from the edge, and this keeps everything anchored so that nothing will get out of place while we do the quilting. Now we need to pick a thread color. So I have a number of choices here, and I'm just going to dump them out on the quilt, and then we're going to reel some off and see what color we like. I think the blues are going to be way too dark. I'm going to eliminate those right now. Even those purples, they would work, but they're pretty stark. I don't like my quilting to show up a lot on the background. Now that's a matter of preference, but I really like a medium or lighter tone. That's a little too pink, and it's going to show up quite drastically on those dark colors. Probably not going to use that. Lavender will look good on a lot of the different prints. That would be a good one. You could use this kind of coral, and that is actually would blend in pretty well, but I think I'm going to use the lavender. I think that will look the best. The next thing we need to pick is a quilting pattern. This quilt has flowers and leaves, and this pattern would work. I like it. It's very balanced. There's not a lot of thread in any one spot, so that's a possibility. I also like this pattern. This is called Calm Waters, and I use this for batiks quite often. Now this quilt doesn't look watery, but it does have batiks. I will keep it in mind. This is one I really like. It reminds me of wood bark, and the quilt has so many natural elements in it that I think this is really going to enhance the quilt quite nicely. I've got the correct thread, I've got the correct pattern, so all we have to do is start. I'm really happy with how the Equinox quilt turned out. The colors, there's a lot of bright colors in here, but when the quilt is all done, they mix in so nicely. We have purples and blues, even browns, and they just looked better and better and better the farther I got along making the quilt. So it's 62 by 74. It's a nice throw size. I used about 2.5 yards between the background and this little border. That's the same fabric here. 40 pieces from a jelly roll, the whole jelly roll, 1.25 yards for the border, and look at the quilting on the back of this here. Very interesting with this almost plain batik back. Very fun to make. So each block was a little complicated, not difficult, but a little complicated, but there's only 20 blocks in the whole quilt, so it really didn't take very long at all. Very satisfying, lots of fun to make. Thanks for watching our tutorial today on how to make the Equinox quilt. I hope you enjoyed it. Now we're going to have another giveaway. We have this fun quilt pattern that we made called Cutting Corners, and this beautiful chestnut brown quilt is what you could win. So just click on the link below that says giveaway and enter your name and your email address. This is open to everyone worldwide, so good luck.